I stood outside the heavy oak doors of the Aspen chalet, shivering in a coat that hadn't been warm enough for 3 winters. Inside, the fire was roaring. I could see the golden light spilling onto the snow, could hear the clink of crystal and the laughter that always sounded a little too loud, a little too desperate to be happy. They weren't just celebrating Christmas. They were celebrating a $15 million commission. My sister, Chloe, had finally landed the deal of a lifetime, selling the Summit, the most exclusive eco-mansion in Colorado. And me? I wasn't there to toast. I was there because the caterer canceled, and they needed someone to hold the trays. I didn't knock. Guests knock. Servants use the side entrance. I walked around to the service door, my boots crunching on the ice, and let myself in with the key code they'd texted me an hour ago. The warmth hit me instantly, smelling of pine and expensive perfume. I took a breath, steeling myself. Tonight was going to be different. Tonight, I wasn't just walking into a party, I was walking into a trap I'd spent 5 years building. I have to ask, have you ever been the invisible person in a room full of people who should love you? Drop a yes in the comments if you know exactly how cold that feels. I want to know I'm not alone in this. My mother, Angela, didn't greet me with a hug. She didn't ask how I'd been or why I looked so tired. She greeted me with a hanger. Finally, she sighed, thrusting a garment bag at my chest. Go to the laundry room and change. Quickly, the investors are already on their second round of drinks, and the agency sent a girl who doesn't know the difference between Brut and Blanc de Blancs. I unzipped the bag. Inside was a gray housekeeping uniform. Stiff polyester, white collar, completely shapeless. It wasn't just a uniform, it was a costume. It was a prop designed to make me invisible, to ensure that no one in that room would mistake me for a member of the family. Mom, I started, my voice quiet. I thought I was coming to dinner. You are, she said, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. You're helping with dinner, we can't have you wandering around in whatever that is you're wearing. We need to make a good impression, Blair. Chloe's future depends on tonight. Just be a team player for once. I took the uniform. I went to the laundry room. And I put it on. I know what you're thinking. You're wondering why I did it. You're wondering why I didn't just throw that scratchy gray polyester in her face and walk back out into the snow. That's the trap of normalization. When you grow up in a house where love is a currency you can never quite afford, you start to bargain. You learn early on that abuse is a form of attention, and servitude is the price of admission. I didn't put that uniform on because I was weak. I put it on because a small, broken part of me still believed that if I was useful enough, if I was obedient enough, they might finally let me stay. I was conditioned to believe that being their servant was better than being a stranger. When I walked into the main living area, the heat was suffocating. The room was filled with men in $5,000 suits and women dripping in diamonds. And there, in the center of it all, was my sister, Chloe. She was radiant, holding court with a champagne flute in one hand and a floor plan in the other. She looked like the golden child she was, glowing with the promise of unearned wealth. It's called the Summit, Chloe was saying, her voice pitching up the way it always did when she was lying or bragging. It's the most exclusive property in the Rockies. A technological marvel. The owner is this eccentric recluse, never shows her face. Probably some trust fund heiress who bought it on a whim and got bored. The group laughed. I moved through them like a ghost, topping off glasses. And you secured the listing? One of the investors asked, eyeing her appreciatively. Exclusive rights, Chloe lied without blinking. I'm the only one she trusts. The commission alone is going to put Tyler and me in a different tax bracket. We're finally going to have the lifestyle we deserve. I stopped beside her. She held out her empty glass without looking at me, continuing her story. This is Blair, my father, Richard chimed in, gesturing vaguely in my direction as I poured. He lowered his voice to a conspiratorial whisper that was meant to be heard. She's our charity project. A bit of a failed artist. We try to keep her busy, give her some structure. It's important to stay humble, you know? The investors nodded sympathetically, looking at me with pity. Good for you, Richard. Looking out for the less fortunate. I felt the bottle in my hand grow heavy. They weren't just ignoring my success, they were marketing my failure. They were using my poverty as a prop to showcase their own benevolence. I finished pouring the champagne. I didn't spill a drop. I retreated to the wall, smoothed the front of my gray uniform, and watched. They were toasting to the sale of my house. They were spending the commission from my bank account. And they were mocking the recluse owner who was standing 5 feet away, refilling the ice bucket. To the summit. Chloe cheered. To the summit, I whispered to myself. The dinner was a masterclass in arrogance. My family didn't just ignore me, they performed their success for an audience of investors, using me as the counterweight. Every time Chloe mentioned her $15 million commission, she would glance at me, checking to make sure I was properly subdued. Tyler and I are looking at yachts, she announced, swirling her wine. Nothing massive, just something to keep in the Mediterranean for summers. With this deal closing, cash flow isn't exactly going to be an issue. Tyler, sitting next to her, laughed. It was a sharp, grating sound. He turned to me as I refilled his water glass. And what about you, Blair? Still painting those depressing little pictures in your studio apartment? I'm working on a few projects, I said, my voice deliberately flat. Projects? He snorted. That's code for unemployed, right? I didn't answer. I just moved to the next guest. Richard tapped his glass with a fork, silencing the table. I'd like to make a toast, he boomed, standing up. To my daughter, Chloe, the only one of my children who had the drive to make something of herself. To the deal of the century. Here, the investors murmured, raising their glasses. I stood by the wall, invisible in my gray uniform, and watched them drink. They were celebrating a mirage. They were spending money that didn't exist. There's just one problem, Chloe said, setting down her glass. The driver called. He's sick. He can't take us up to the property for the viewing. Panic flickered in her eyes. The viewing was the closing act. If the investors didn't see the house tonight, the deal could stall. Don't worry, Angela said quickly, her eyes darting to me. Blair can drive. She's not doing anything important. Me? I asked, feigning surprise. Yes, you, Richard snapped. Make yourself useful. Go bring the SUV around, and try not to hit anything. That car is worth more than your life. I walked out into the cold, retrieved the keys, and pulled the massive black SUV to the front. The family and the investors piled in, complaining about the legroom and the temperature. I adjusted the heat silently and began the drive up the mountain. The road to the summit was treacherous, steep, winding, and covered in fresh snow. I navigated it with ease. I knew every turn. I knew exactly where the ice patches formed. Slow down! Angela shrieked from the back seat as I took a curve. You're going to kill us all! She's doing it on purpose, Chloe muttered. She's jealous. As we climbed higher, the trees thinned, revealing the vast, snowy expanse of the Rockies. And then, it appeared. The summit. It rose from the mountain like a glacier made of glass and steel. It was cantilevered over the edge of a cliff, defying gravity. The lights from the atrium glowed warm and inviting against the blue twilight. It wasn't just a house. It was a fortress of solitude and power. The car fell silent. Even Tyler stopped sneering. My God, one of the investors whispered. It's magnificent. That's the commission. Chloe breathed, her greed naked in her voice. That's my future. I pulled up to the heated driveway and put the car in park. I didn't look back at them. I just stared at the house I had designed. The house I had built. The house they thought they were selling. Well, Richard barked, don't just sit there, open the doors. I got out. The cold air bit at my cheeks, but I didn't feel it. I felt electric. The wind at 9,000 feet doesn't just blow. It cuts. It stripped the warmth right out of the air the second we stepped out of the SUV. Chloe was shivering violently in her sleeveless silk dress, her teeth chattering as she marched toward the massive front entrance. The investors huddled in their cashmere coats, looking less impressed by the view and more annoyed by the temperature. Hurry up, Chloe, Richard barked, rubbing his hands together. We're freezing out here. I'm trying, she snapped back, her fingers fumbling with the keypad mounted on the stone pillar. I leaned against the hood of the car, watching. I knew exactly what was happening. The code she had was a temporary broker's code. It expired at 6 p.m. It was now 8:15. Beep, 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 buzz, red light. Chloe punched it in again, harder this time. Beep, 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 buzz. It's just the cold, she stammered, turning back to the investors with a tight, panicked smile. The sensors are a bit sensitive. Just give me a second. She tried a third time. The lock remained sealed. The heavy steel doors didn't budge. One of the investors checked his watch. Miss Bennett, if you don't have access, we can reschedule. Ideally, when it isn't 10 degrees below zero. I have access, Chloe shrieked, her professional mask shattering. She turned on me, her eyes wild. It's because you parked too close. The proximity sensors are jamming the signal. Back the car up, Blair. Now. That's not how sensors work, I said calmly. Don't argue with her, Angela screamed, stomping through the snow toward me. Do what she says. You're ruining everything. You're just standing there like a statue while your sister's future falls apart. Fix it. Yeah, Blair, Tyler sneered, stepping forward aggressively. Make yourself useful for once. I looked at them. My mother, screaming in my face. My father, shaking his head in disgust. My sister, blaming me for her own incompetence. They looked so small against the backdrop of the fortress I had built. You want me to fix it? I asked. Yes, Chloe screamed, slamming her hand against the frozen wood of the door. I pushed off the car. I walked past Angela. I walked past Tyler. I walked past the shivering investors. The snow crunched under my boots, the only sound in the sudden silence. Where are you going? Richard shouted. Get back in the car. I didn't answer. I walked up the stone steps to where Chloe stood, trembling and desperate. Move, I said. What are you doing? Get away from. I didn't let her finish. I stepped in front of the keypad. I didn't reach for the buttons. Instead, I placed my right hand flat against the black glass panel beside it. A beam of blue light scanned my palm. A second beam swept across my eyes. The system hummed. It was a sound I knew better than my own heartbeat. It was the sound of ownership. Identity confirmed, the automated voice boomed, echoing off the canyon walls. It wasn't a generic robotic voice, it was a custom interface. Welcome home, Architect Blair. The heavy steel bolts retracted with a deep, resonant thud. The massive double doors swung open silently, revealing the warm, golden glow of the atrium. I lowered my hand. I turned to look at my family. They weren't moving. They weren't breathing. They were staring at me like I had just grown wings. After you? I said. The interior of the summit was like stepping into the future. It wasn't just a house. It was a cathedral of sustainability. The floors were polished, petrified wood. The walls were living moss and glass, and the air smelled of pure oxygen. In the center of the atrium, a massive digital display dominated the space. It cycled through architectural schematics, energy efficiency stats, and a portrait of the founder breaking ground on the project. The founder was me. There I was, 20 feet high, wearing a hard hat and a tailored suit, holding a silver shovel. My name, Blair Bennett, was etched in light beneath the image. The family stumbled inside, their eyes wide, their mouths hanging open. The silence was absolute. The only sound was the soft hum of the geothermal heating system. I walked past them, my boots clicking on the floor. I reached up and unbuttoned the collar of the gray uniform. I pulled the rough fabric down, shrugging it off my shoulders and letting it pool on the floor like a discarded skin. Underneath, I was wearing a black silk jumpsuit and diamond earrings that caught the atrium light. I didn't stop. I walked to the head of the conference table, a 20-foot slab of reclaimed redwood, and sat down. I rested my hands on the smooth surface and looked at them. You wanted to see the owner, I said, my voice echoing slightly in the vast space. I'm here, Angela gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Blair? But, how? How? I repeated. I didn't just buy this house, Mom. I designed it. I hold the patents for the geothermal technology that heats it. I own the company that built it. I watched their faces. It was fascinating, really. I could see the exact moment their brains tried to recalibrate. They were stripping away the failed artist narrative they'd clung to for a decade and trying to replace it with this new reality. But the most interesting part wasn't the shock, it was the hunger. I saw it in Chloe's eyes first. The panic about the lost commission vanished, replaced by a calculating gleam. She looked at the house, then at me, and I could practically hear her doing the math. My sister is the owner. My sister is a billionaire. Blair, she cried, rushing forward with a smile that looked painful. Oh my God, this is incredible. Why didn't you tell us? We could have what? I interrupted. Used me for a bigger commission? Bragged about me to your friends? No, she protested, though her eyes darted to the digital portrait again. We could have celebrated you. We're family. Richard stepped forward, puffing out his chest, trying to reclaim his authority. Blair. This is unexpected. But it's a family asset now. We need to think about how to manage this portfolio together. I have some ideas about. I laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound that cut through his bluster. A family asset? I asked. Dad, 10 minutes ago, you told me my life was worth less than your car. You told me I was a charity project. You don't get to claim equity in an empire you tried to bury. They stood there, stripped of their arrogance, shivering in their expensive coats. Without their perceived status, without the ability to look down on me, they were nothing. They were just small, greedy people, standing in a house they couldn't afford, staring at a woman they didn't know. Sit down, I said. They sat. Chloe laughed. It was a brittle, desperate sound. Okay, Blair. Good joke. You got us. How did you hack the system? Did you sleep with the real owner? Is that it? She looked around the room, searching for an escape hatch, a way to rewrite the narrative back to one where she was the winner. We're family. We can figure this out. I can still be the broker. I mean, it makes sense, right? Keep it in the family. I know the market better than anyone. I didn't answer. I reached under the table and pulled out a thick manila folder. I slid it across the polished wood until it stopped right in front of her. What is this? She asked, her hands shaking as she opened it. That, I said, is a record of every interaction you claim to have with the owner, every email, every phone call. She stared at the pages. But I spoke to her. I spoke to her assistant. You spoke to an AI, I corrected. I programmed it to screen potential brokers. You failed every single test. Failed? She whispered. You never asked about the geothermal specs, I said, ticking the points off on my fingers. You never asked about the land conservation easement. You didn't even check the county tax records to see who owned the LLC. If you had done 5 minutes of due diligence, you would have seen my name on the deed. You were so busy calculating your commission, you forgot to do your job. She looked at Tyler, then at our parents, but there was no help coming. You're not selling this house, Chloe, I said, my voice cutting through the room. You're trespassing. Richard stood up, his face red. Now wait a minute, Blair. You can't just dismiss your sister like that. We're a team. We pushed you, don't you see? If we hadn't been tough on you, you never would have built this. Angela nodded frantically, tears streaming down her face. Exactly. We knew you had it in you. We just needed to light a fire. This is our victory too. I looked at them. Really looked at them. They were terrified. Not because they had hurt me, but because they had lost control of me. You didn't push me, I said, my voice low and dangerous. You discarded me. You treated me like furniture. You made me wear a uniform to serve your friends because you were ashamed of me. I stood up. And you don't get to invest in what you threw away. I pulled my phone out and tapped the screen. The lights in the room shifted from warm gold to a stark, cold white. Security is on the way, I said. You have 5 minutes to leave my property. You can't do this, Chloe shrieked. It's freezing outside. How are we supposed to get down? There's a taxi service in town, I said, turning my back on them. I hear the wait time is about an hour. Better start walking. I watched from the gallery window on the 3rd floor. The glass was triple-paned, engineered to withstand blizzards, so I couldn't hear them. I could only see. They were huddled together at the end of the driveway, 4 dark shapes against the blinding white snow. Chloe was hugging herself, her silk dress useless against the wind. My father was pacing, yelling into his phone, probably screaming at a dispatcher who didn't care who he thought he was. The taxi took 45 minutes. I stood there the entire time, holding a mug of tea that stayed perfectly hot. I didn't feel a flicker of guilt. I didn't feel the urge to run down with blankets. I just felt calibrated. For 30 years, I had been the variable they tried to solve, the error in their perfect equation. Now, I was the constant. They were the ones out in the cold, trying to find a way back in. When the taillights finally disappeared around the bend, I turned away. I didn't go to sleep. I walked through the house, turning off the lights one by one. The atrium went dark. The conference room went dark. The only light came from the glow of the server room in the basement, the beating heart of the empire I had built from the scraps they threw away. They thought the summit was just a trophy. They didn't know it was a seed. This wasn't just my home. It was the headquarters for the Aura Trust. The patent royalties didn't go into yachts or summer homes. They went into sustainable housing projects for people who actually knew what it felt like to be cold. I wasn't hoarding this power. I was planting it where it would grow. Far away from the weeds of my family. Winter turned to spring. I didn't hear from them for weeks, and then, the messages started. Small pings in the middle of my workday. Chloe, I lost the listing. The agency let me go. Can we just talk, please? Angela. Your father's blood pressure is up. He misses you. We all do. Don't be like this. I sat in my studio, the morning light hitting my drafting table. I looked at the messages. I didn't block them. I didn't respond. I just swiped left. Delete. Delete. It wasn't petty, it was efficient. Emotion is just bad data in an audit, and I had cleared the cache. I picked up my pencil and went back to the schematic. I was designing a new community center in Detroit. It needed to be strong. It needed to be warm. It needed to be a place where no one ever felt like a guest in their own life. The silence in the room was absolute. It wasn't lonely, it was the sound of a structural load being lifted. I took a breath, and for the first time in my life, my lungs filled completely. They wanted a housekeeper, they got an architect, and I had a lot of work to do. Blair built her empire in silence while they made noise. If you're building something in the dark right now, keep going. Share this story if you believe the best revenge is massive success. And don't forget to subscribe, we have more stories of justice coming next.